Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Arts Play Radio with me, Ike Carton. I think I might have started a moment earlier than I usually would because I anticipated that I would be being kicked off by the app, as usually happens. But it looks like we are all going as well as could possibly be. I'm going to be joined in just a moment by my co-host, the amazing Eski Mojito. Eski, are you there? Can you hear me? And how are you doing? I'm not sure if I'm audible. That's probably my fault. Hopefully, other people can hear me. Eski, can you hear me?
Hello, I can hear you. Goodness.
Oh, fantastic. Hooray.
I've got that
Apologies.
I've got that whole like pandemic talking on mute the whole time still in my head, so I'm very sorry. How are you doing?
All right, man. Yeah, not too badly. Yeah, apologies for that. I was just flummoxed by the fact that I wasn't immediately kicked off the platform when I tried to start the show. So, yeah, there we go.
Yeah, it's no, it's really just all our it's all our cool guy rules, isn't it? We know what's going on. Yeah, we know how to use the stuff.
So, if you are listening to this, this is Arts Play Radio. It's a show where we speak with artists about creating their work and what it means to be an artist in the 21st century. We archive the show on YouTube and on SoundCloud as well. So, people who want to listen in later can, and you can send people that way if you'd like to. But what I'd love to do is introduce our guest for this week, who is the amazing, the fantastic, and the fascinating Wondermundo. Wonder, welcome.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here today.
Brilliant. And usually what we do when we start these kind of things is just ask our guests to tell us a little bit about who you are and the sort of art that you make and how you describe it to people.
Yeah, so a little bit about me. My name's Jessica. I go by Wondermundo online here. And I'm a first generation Mexican American, and I had been in design, content, and collaboration for like 20 years. I started doing art. Like I've always been doing art since I was a kid. When I was like 15, I was that kid. This will age me, but I went and I got HTML for dummies and figured out how to build websites with my dial up. And I once there, I really fell into love with design. Like got Paint Shop Pro, and I had a scanner, and I was like scanning things and creating my own buttons. And I knew then that like I wanted to work with the internet, and I wanted to be a graphic designer, web designer. So I went into that. That was kind of my career for the first like 10 years after I graduated college. And I loved it. I've always loved my job because I was allowed to create. But then in March of last year, I decided to start doing art for myself again. Kind of rediscovered it. That's a whole different story. But I rediscovered my art, and I realized that I wasn't happy creating for other people anymore. I kind of had lost that, and I started creating for myself again, and really kind of use the skills I had learned, but for my own personal digital art, which I kind of had gone away from. And so a lot of my art is now, the way I describe it is it's always evolving, it's always changing, because a lot of it is how I'm interpreting the world and interpreting myself. When I started in NFTs, it was because last year in March, I had started doing art therapy. And I found out I had a dissociative disorder throughout that year. So a lot of my art last year is really processing a lot of that and really coming to terms with what that meant. And really me kind of going on a self-love journey. It might sound cheesy, but it was me kind of trying to figure that out. And then this year in February, I quit my job to just try to work in Web3 full time as an artist, and also use the other skills I have to, like, get a job. And I am working with Zero X Thulu, for example, to help manage their community and social, which was the part of my job that I liked, which is like building consensus without authority. But I really wasn't doing that hands-on creation anymore. I had reached a level in my career where, like, I was leading teams. I wasn't actually hands on anymore, as well. So that's kind of a long, I guess, intro of who I am. But a lot of my work you find these bits of myself within all my work, as far as you see a lot of my Mexican heritage in my work. You see a lot of vibrant colors, and I have what I call Wondermundos, which is like Wondermundo is the face that I drew that kind of reminded me I was an artist again, because I used to draw all the time when I was 16. I had just forgotten.
And do you think, are you still doing art therapy? Is this still part of the process for you?
Yeah, it is for me. It's I don't share a lot as I used to about that, but it's definitely something that I continue every day. Even for me, my art is so much of tells me a lot that I'm not always conscious of, but there are parts of me that communicate through the art.
And do you think that the sort of Web3 space is a supportive one for that sort of process of mental health, and working through things that are teaching you more about yourself as you go on?
I have found it to be, but I think that you kind of have to be ready for it, and you have to be self-reflecting and growing as a person, because you're gonna I can't answer that for everybody. For me, it has been like that because that's a lot of my processing and how I process things. But I know that sometimes I get told that, like, in DMs, that they wish they could say what I say and be as vulnerable as I've been. So I guess that's also something that I don't know if everyone wants to or can. And I can definitely see, there's a lot of noise around toxic positivity and, like, how to keep well. But I do think Web3 is a place, as long as you find the right people and you yourself are able to have your own mental, like, grounding as well, to be able to kind of filter that noise when you inevitably get people that are, I guess, hating on what you're doing.
Yeah, I guess you at least have the potential to cultivate that community that is on board with you in a way that maybe would have been much more difficult to do so in the past.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think it's, like, also a different time, like post COVID, people are more openly talking about mental health and things like that. And so, for me, I've been very open about my mental health journey, because it's also been kind of what led me back to NFTs, was me starting, like, trauma therapy, and then being like, oh my gosh, I forgot I used to create art. Like, I was an artist, because, dissociative disorders kind of have this, what you call amnesia, and you forget things. And so, like, it's not a joke when I say I forgot I was an artist for like 20 years, because I did. And so it's kind of tied with my journey. And it's also part of my authenticity, I think, where part of my work is the visual part, but there's also the description where I tell a lot of stories, as well. And so I think that you might find the community, but I know it's also not for everybody who want to do that. But I've always been open. When I even have a collection in on Tezos called the Sage Collection, which is me when I actually went into a treatment center for 35 days to, like, last year. And I went and I had all I could do was sketch with pen and paper. So me coming out after that was really important for me to put it out there, because I'm also about destigmatizing that mental health, stigma that we have still today.
I was really struck actually by because you're also a blogger as well, right? And we spoke to Epic Thundercat last week, and she was talking a lot about um, how this is. I mean, it's almost like a lost art in this, in this world at the moment. I mean, do you find that that you need? Does it help having, like, the blog with the art, or can one coexist without the other? That makes any sense.
Yeah, for me, no. And I think that's also why I started liking Tumblr a lot, because I can put the pieces together. But for me personally, like, I don't always tell the story of what a piece of art means, but I like to go back and do it. So for me, I think my art, part of my creative outlet, is both together. Twitter doesn't make it conducive to that though, so it's a little separate. But for me, they go hand in hand.
And is it always that sort of internal stuff that is what inspires you, or are there other things like that begin the process of a piece starting for you?
Yeah, there's so it's definitely that internal stuff, but there's also things that inspire me outside where like I'm a big fan of Marian art. So I grew up like Catholic. So I always say I'm a cultural Catholic. So I'm a big fan of like the Virgen de Guadalupe art. And so I got but I like to do it different. Like I'll put an alien head on it or something. And I take inspiration from that and I guess from my culture. Like my last collection I just did this week was sugar skulls. So I was inspired to do that because it's kind of the season for sugar skulls. It's almost Dia de los Muertos. So there's things like that that I definitely have taken inspiration from. But it's a new thing this year. Last year when I was creating, all of it was really internal. And this year, I think now that I've grown and I'm in a different place than I was last year at this time, it's really opened me up to see the inspiration from other places or to kind of get a spark from something else.
Yeah, that makes sense. And those sugar skulls are really massively vibrant, and they have a lot of energy in them. Whereabouts are you when you're making these things? Do you have a physical space that you go to, or does that vary? Do you have a studio? How's your setup like that?
Yeah, it varies. I think sometimes I'm on the couch with my son and my partner, and we're just hanging out. But a lot of the times, I am in my office, my crafts room. I was my home office before, and I've been slowly turning into more of a studio. But even in here, I usually sometimes just sit on the couch. I have it here, and I'm working. I used to work on an iPad, but I like to kind of be on my own because even if I'm like on the couch, I'm kind of in my own world.
Yeah, that's understandable. And is it all digital now for you? Are you still sort of doing physical based stuff as well?
It's all digital now, and even I did paint a little bit before, years before, but like I never kept up with it. It was I always had a different craft, and I still have that stuff, so I might go back to it, but I've done different things like just paint abstracts, and then I also went through a period where I was collecting really unique fabric and then stapling it on like a canvas board, stretching it. But right now it's been mainly digital, and I don't know when that'll change. I think it just depends. Like I always say, depends on my mood on where I'm at. But I also right now, even though it's mostly digital, sometimes I start with physical as far as like scanning in some paper or taking in scanning in a sketching or a drawing or scanning in some texture, so I have that picture to start with.
I was going to say actually that's like a good starting point, I guess. Is that typical, like for you when you begin a piece? Would you have been doodling on a piece, or would you see something um, like texture that's interesting, and then that begins the piece, or are you doodling on an iPad? How does that usually happen?
It depends. I think for the most part, usually it's something like you said, where I see something and whether it's like a brick wall and I like the texture of it and I start from that. Um, it's not always a sketch. At least it hasn't been this year. I did a lot of sketching last year, but this year it's been more of ideas. Sometimes I'll just write the idea down and then I'll come back to it and start sketching and procreate. But I also sometimes start out an idea, if that makes sense. Like I don't always know where I'm gonna land. Like I don't always have a finished thought in my mind. I just start creating, and then whatever happens, happens. It's hard to describe, but that's kind of my process. It's kind of like if I don't have that beginning part of it, I might just open it up and I'll start. It just depends on what kind of day or how I'm feeling.
So is there's a lot of editing you'd say in your work? Is a lot of, do you start and then scrap it, start again until you get it right, or is it a lot of automatic creating? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think there's things that I don't always scrap it, but I might leave it. I might start something, and then come back to it in a little bit. The ones that I do kind of start and scrap a lot are like the Wondermundos. Usually those are ones that I do in a one sitting and I get those drawn out. And that's because I've been to do those daily.
Cool. Can I ask about your about you have a real sense of like community within your work. I've gone the wondermundo.com, and there's a lot. Like I was bang on about your blogging because it's about your art, of course. But I've noticed you kind of do a lot of almost outreach to people, as far as you have the Twitter basics for NFT artists. And things. I wanted to know, how does it? Do you find that Web3 is different in this respect, that there is a lot more sense on the community?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think Web3 is way more community based than previous like a Web2 or however you want to think about that. And really, I think it's also I love sharing knowledge, and I think Web3 is
Hmm.
part of that too. And so, how do you share the knowledge with the community in a way that's not always like token gated or someone's paying for alpha, for example, right? Just share it. And so, I like to do that as well, and I think that's a big part of it. And I think Web3 is so much more about community than people realize sometimes, unless
Yeah.
you're
Because one thing I saw in one of your posts says, how do you motivate yourself?
oh yeah, yeah, that was usually crowdsource a lot too from tweets, and then I put those on there as well. So yeah.
I find that amazing because, like, I was just reading through some of the things people say. Like, I have literally said everything like that they've tweeted back at you, but no one had. I've noticed no one said anything about like reaching out to people and helping people. And I think that's such an amazing thing. What you're doing, as far as where wellness goes and mental health goes, it's quite a scary. Web3 can be quite scary. There's a lot of unknown territory here. So I think it's a really great thing that you're reaching out to people and helping them.
Thanks. Yeah, and I think like there's also this like toxic part of that positivity that you have with Web3. Like we're all gonna make it. When like that's not reality, right? We're not all gonna make it.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of us will. And so I also, and then with this bear market, like sometimes you only see the good stuff, right? And so I like to kind of maybe I do this because it's part of my healing, where like I wish somebody
Mm.
would have said to me once, like, it's okay to not be okay. And so I kind of try to do that as well to kind of balance it, because you see all the, we're gonna make it. You see all this like, just keep going, right? But how do you just keep going if you're, and maybe it's
Where
because
am
I've
I
also,
going?
yeah, if you've grown up, like I grew up in poverty, right? And so
Right.
I also know what it's like to not have my basic needs met. And it's like when you tell people just keep going when they can't even pay their rent and they're worried about that, that's a whole different story. And so
Right.
I kind of like to add that balance just to be more realistic. And again, I say that's part of my healing process, I think,
Sure.
because
Sure.
that's what I wish I would have had.
But also, you've got to ask, like, what is making it? Is that a thing? Does that even exist? I mean, I would say that if you're making your art and it's out there, then and people are interacting with you, that this is an amazing time, that you're living in. You know, I'd say you've made it.
Yeah.
We've all made it. We're making art. We're here talking about it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's why it's like a personal definition, right? Of like where, what is making it? Like before I quit my job and got into NFTs, like I thought I had made it. And it wasn't until I was like, I have everything I wanted. Like, why do I still hate myself? Like, why am I still struggling? And,
Yeah.
that's when I started therapy and art therapy and like kind of figured it out as well. But it took like reaching that point of thinking I've made
Sure.
it to realize like, oh, this not making it.
Can I want to ask you, I don't know if it's just going to come out of left field, but so you grew up in a non-English speaking household. Do you think that informs your art in any way? Like you have to have some kind of universal language, trying to get a point across. in your art?
Yeah, I think it does sometimes. I think there's parts of me that like only speak Spanish. I started speaking English when I was 5, but growing
Mm.
up, my parents still always spoke in Spanish, and I would speak back in English. And the way that I think it shows up though is I have this one piece, for example, called Stuck, and it's kind of like living in two worlds. And so there's this in between that I think you see in a lot of my art, or like kind of tight, or there's two voices or two worlds I'm living in. And I think that is part of growing up in like a Spanish speaking household, and then having to speak English every day for school, but like coming home and like, even I grew up on the Texas Mexico border too, so like not only was I, hearing and speaking Spanish at home, but like on the weekends we would go to Mexico, or if I got sick, so we didn't have health insurance, we would go to Mexico because it's like right there. You just cross the bridge, and so I always felt like I grew up in those two worlds, and I definitely feel like you see a lot of my art. You see that reflected as well. That kind of maybe tension between those two worlds.
Mm. I mean, I find that amazing that as you're saying that, I'm on your Sage collection and I've got the day 28. I understand now, and it's like it's literally in two halves.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Can I ask you the question that we always spring on guests, or we've started to anyway, is something we're always fascinated to hear what people have to say, and that's when you're making a piece, how do you decide, how do you know when something is finished?
Oh, this is a good one, a good question. It feels finished. My process is, and it's hard to describe, like what is that feeling? I don't really know, but I go by feeling, like, and I guess it's maybe in taking all the senses, because it's not so much does it look finished to me, is does it feel finished. And I think that's what I go for. And I don't know what that feeling is. It might be different for everybody, but for me it has to feel finished and not look finished, if that makes any sense.
I think, yeah, it makes a lot of sense, and it's one of those questions where there's no right answer, because I don't even know that it's possible to fully articulate that feeling, right? But and it's going to be different for everybody else. So for you, what does a sort of a day look like? Given you're doing this full time now, how do you get up, have a bowl of cereal, and then start making art, or how do you go about doing it?
Yeah, I think, it depends. I notice that I can't force myself to make art. And I think that's part of like me, like in my dissociative disorder, where there's different parts of me, some are more creative, some more, I guess, business, that like want to try to force it out. But when I try to force it out, I just end up like with internal conflict. So I usually start the day with like, I wake up, take my son to school, drink, start drinking a shitload of coffee, and then I will, I also start journaling, which again, writing is a big part, but I have my daily morning journal. And I do sketch something in the morning. It's like what I call my daily Wondermundo. I don't share those a lot though. Sometimes I do. That just kind of helps me set where I'm at in the day, maybe what part of me is more present, so I know what I'm doing. And then from there, I do spend time checking other social media. Like I said, I mentioned I was working with Zero X Thulu, so I kind of go and I check Twitter for my socials and for Zero X Thulu. And then I create from there on for the day. And I try to give myself like what I call my art time, and then Twitter time. So I'm not spending all day on there. But it's really hard to kind of describe, because I think I also purposely didn't want to force myself to art, so I wouldn't get into like a bad routine. And so I just create when I feel like it, and when I that inspiration hits, for the most part. So that's kind of my day. It's pretty casual, and like there are times where I'm, when I was working on the Sugar Skull collection, I was spending a lot of time just getting that mint ready. But I would say, like, yeah, I don't have like a schedule on like I have to create right now. It's more of I allow myself the flexibility to create if it arises. If not, then it doesn't.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Look, Eski and I are both parents, so I wanted to know like how you sort of fit in that sort of creative work around all the the things that you have to do, picking up kids from school, that sort of thing. Is there? Do you feel like there's special allowances you have to make as a parent in this kind of environment that maybe other people don't even have to think about?
I think it depends. I think for me, compared to like, I think right now I do have like flexibility. I think where like today, my partner's picking him up from school, or he drops him off sometimes in the morning. But compared to my last job, which was very intense, when I was in that corporate environment, I had to travel like every month. I was in meetings from like 8 a.m. until 8 p.m. sometimes. I feel like this has given me more flexibility as an artist to be able to like parent in a way that's healthier and more balanced than me always being like working, if that makes sense. And so I don't know. I think it would be really hard. I think if there are parents that are working full time and trying to do NFTs, like hats off to them. I think that they might need some special allowances. But for the most part, yeah, I think I'm okay just based on what I was doing previously versus what I do now.
Yeah, I very much understand. I've been working from home for almost a decade now, and it's absolutely completely different to what it would have been like going into an office every day. So I was going to sort of finish up by just kind of asking, what are your ambitions with your art, with where you'd like to take it, and what you're hoping to do over, well, whatever the next year or two, I guess.
I'm not gonna lie, I'm gonna be very ambitious. Like, I would love to be like a Beeple or something where like the Wondermundo name is known. It's a brand. And that's what I'm gonna keep building is the brand. And I want to do my art. I want to live off my art. I want to continue to community build. That's important to me. And I want to be in Web3, whether it's my art or working with another project or work, still building community. That's kind of my goals here, is to continue working for things that I believe in, not for things that I feel like I have to work for. And so that's what I'm here. And like, again, if I can't make it be a Beeple someday, I'm very happy just continue working with company like Zero X Thulu and continue to do my art because that's what I want to do when I'm here. But maybe I'll reach Beeple status by in a couple of years. I don't know.
Well, we certainly hope that you do, and we've very, very much appreciated you coming on and chatting to us. Well, this evening our time, I think it's probably the afternoon for you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Really good questions.
Thank you so much, Jessica. I'm really sorry about my connection problems, but yeah, we're really big fans of your work. So thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you, and thanks everyone in the audience too for coming in and hearing.
Well, thanks all for coming along tonight and joining Arts Play Radio. And we will be back again next week. I'll be flying solo, talking to the amazing NFT Murder NFT. I always get the wrong way around. And then we will put this up on our YouTube and our SoundCloud for later listening, and so it's archived. And if anyone is going to be in London for NFT London on the 4th of November, we are hosting, that's us as Cool Dudes Club, and our esteemed benefactor, Lux Ether. We're hosting a little event called Luxapalooza, which will be a free entry, sort of casual get together at a pub in Mayfair. We'll have some live art happening, some free drinks, and just chatting about art and creativity, Web3, and all those good things. So drop us a line if you're interested, and I'll send you the link to the claim page for your free ticket. And otherwise, enjoy the rest of your day, and we will see you back here same time next week for more art conversation. Thanks, Eski.
See ya. Take care.
Bye all.